For over 20 years, I believed my hair was biologically incapable of growing long, until I realized that the entire modern hair care industry was designed to keep it that way. When I discovered historical hair care, all of that changed. My hair is now twice as long as it ever was before and healthier than ever, but with less products than I ever used to use. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing the 4 reasons why historical hair care is the future and not the past. Reason 1, they had better results. It's indisputable that there are tons and tons of women from various periods across history and various cultures, and men for that matter too, that had really long, gorgeous hair. Now, some may say that these were just exceptional cases and that really everyone else just had like shoulder length hair or something, but I personally think that's a little ridiculous. We can find countless paintings and photos of women from all periods of history with at least waist length hair, whereas today we would be hard pressed to find a woman with waist length hair. Now sure, fashions have changed, meaning many people simply keep their hair cut shorter, but we still have a very large segment of the population who do really desire long hair and have been trying for years to grow it with no success. Whereas I can find a historical source actually from as recent as the early 1900s, when hair care had already begun to change, that reference many girls as young as 13 years old having waist-length hair. So that's pretty shocking. I mean, that being a common occurrence for a 13-year-old girl to have waist-length hair. Am I saying that everyone had floor-length hair? No, but there was still a relatively significant number of women who did, actually, and those who didn't still had hair that was on average much longer than ours. Today, it seems that we also have another problem. Forget the length issue. There are more people than ever who are beginning to lose significant amounts of hair, beginning as young as in their 20s. I would argue that both of these problems, the seeming inability for many or most people to grow long hair, as well as the massive propensity towards hair loss in both men and women, are casualties of the times we live in. At a time when saving time is the top priority, hair care is very much meant to be an industry designed to keep people dependent on and buying chemically based hair products. Not to mention the prevalence of full-blown chemical treatments like hair dyes and straightening perms and the very common use of heat tools. Okay, so what is the second reason that historical hair care is the future and not the past? Reason 2, it's tested by time. So this is actually the main concept that drew me to historical hair care in the first place. Back several years ago when I was failing to grow long hair, cut all my hair off and wanted to find something completely new that would work. I came to recognize or believe that ideas and practices that have persisted for long periods of time are inherently more trustworthy than those which are recent innovations, especially when it comes to practical on-the-ground lifestyle choices like hair care. So let's take a basic hair care practice like hair washing frequency. How often do people wash their hair now versus throughout the grand span of history? Okay, so historically, hair was washed quite infrequently in almost all times and cultures, according to modern standards. And when they were washing their hair, they certainly weren't using the shampoos and soaps and things that we are using either. So if many cultures practiced what is by modern standards very infrequent hair washing and still had on average healthier, longer hair than in the modern day, it stands to reason that infrequent hair washing, if not causal of long hair, at least not directly, it's at least compatible with keeping hair long and healthy. Does that make sense? I hope so. This is the main reason why, having struggled for years with no success to grow my own hair long, I figured there must be something wrong with modern hair care practices. Because after all, I had pretty much done everything the modern hair world would say is conducive to growing long hair, and it had still failed miserably. having become convinced that historical women tended towards longer, healthier hair than people today, I realized it was time to do some digging. So first of all, in what ways did historical hair care differ from that in the modern day? And second, was I willing to let go of all of my preconceived ways of doing things in order to accept radically different practices? Like, for example, dry detangling my thick, curly, tangle-prone hair. This felt, frankly, completely opposite to how I'd been taught by the modern hair care world to care for my hair. But once I learned to embrace something that felt wrong to my modern brain, everything began to change. Reason 3, less consumeristic. Historical hair care is inherently less consumeristic than modern hair care, and this is something we should be thinking about more than ever in today's world. It's actually estimated that over 552 million shampoo bottles are discarded annually just in the US alone, not to mention the actual products themselves, these chemically based concoctions that are being rinsed down the drains of every shower and ending up in water systems. Let's be clear though, historical people were not any more environmentally conscious than you and I, at least not through conscious choice. They simply were by default. Plastics hadn't been invented yet, at least not until very recently, and even commercially produced hair products that historical people might have bought were still very small market productions, likely family-run businesses, not global multi-million-dollar corporations like what we have today. Even if companies would have wanted to be that powerful in the past, the technology simply didn't exist to support it. Therefore, the historical hair care techniques that we see were, first of all, much less based on products at all, period. They were based on techniques and lifestyle practices, both of which don't require consuming products. For example, at least for those with straighter hair, nightly boar bristle brushing was both a technique as well as a lifestyle that allowed women to achieve clean, smooth, shiny, manageable hair without any products other than their own scalp oils and a brush that they would buy one time, or maybe it was even passed down from their mother for all I know. Do you see how this way of hair care that doesn't rely on people needing to regularly buy things might have been wanted to be covered up and done away with by powerful corporations who are desiring recurring income? And we did end up seeing in the 1900s onward a lot of clever marketing that started coming on the scene to convince people that their hair and scalps were dirty and the only way to fix it was with these products that they made. Another example of this is protective styling and nightly braiding of the hair. So this was also just a lifestyle choice that most historical people from various cultures used that greatly reduced the need for external styling products. Also, at many points in history and many cultures, the hair was actually completely covered during the day, decoratively in all kinds of beautiful ways with scarves and shawls and headdresses and hats, which was also, again, a way of preserving the health, shine, and moisture of the hair without the need for any products to do so. Even a practice like this idea of head covering can actually still be easily translated to the modern world. I use scarves over my hair when I am at home and I want to just put it away and forget about it, but still keep my hair safe and tangle-free. And you can also artfully use scarves even when you're going out to wrap your hair, like for example in vintage scarf styles. And finally, something that I've made a whole video about is something called snoods, which are another sort of vintage style that's easily transferable to the modern world, as I showed on that video. On to the last reason that historical hair care is the future and not the past. Reason 4, more self-sufficient. Historical hair care was simply more self-sufficient. This fits quite nicely into our last point about it being less consumeristic, but there are nuances here in the two different points. So for example, I'm sorry to any hairdressers watching this, but women in history didn't really go to hairdressers, at least not in the way people do today, and not to cut, dye, or otherwise treat their hair. Hairdressers did exist, but generally what historical people called hairdressers, first of all, would have only been available to the wealthy. Second of all, they likely might have been in-home servants whose main job was to literally dress the hair, meaning putting it up in the elaborate styles that women like to wear and so forth. And these types of servants may have been the same people who would later brush out the wealthy lady's hair before bed. But apart from these historical forms of hairdressers, the type of hairdresser we think of today, who will cut the hair in a face framing style or apply chemical hair dyes to bring out the natural colors of the person's complexion. Sorry. Anyway, that was just not a thing in history. Any hair trimming that happened, and yes, most historical women did trim their hair, what we might call micro trims. It generally happened at home, either with female servants or family members or friends. Yeah, it happened at home. And it was a minimal thing, and it was just more for like maintenance of your hair ends as opposed to like creating a style through cutting. In history, haircuts were not at all the focus of what it meant to have good hair. Having good hair had far more to do with the small, daily, self-sufficient hair care practices like the boar bristle brushing that they did every night or the protective styling that all contributed to healthy hair. And that's not to mention the lack of reliance on external commercial hair products. Even the products that historical women did use on their hair or body, for that matter, were usually DIY products. You can actually find tons of old recipe books that still exist for hair and cosmetic recipes that used ingredients that were easily available either from the kitchen or the garden. Having made the leap personally from a product-heavy routine to completely natural practices has changed everything for me. In fact, I went as far as slow infusing my own historically inspired 14-ingredient herbal hair growth oil after noticing that most growth oils for sale rely on just 2 or 3 ingredients. I perfected this formula for the last 8 years, intending on keeping it a family secret. Not actually, it's on my blog, but I was never intending to sell it. But I did, 1 year ago, finally decide to make it available to the public last year. Actually, I did make improvements to the recipe, and that part is a family secret when it comes to the recipe, but you're still able to buy it and use it. If it feels aligned with your journey, I'll leave the link below so you can read the reviews and learn more. Thanks for joining me on this video, and I'll see you on the next one.